Today we're dealing with something that we never imagined.
Worst mass shooting in U.S. history.
This was an act of terror and an act of hate.
So many people right now not knowing the status of their loved ones.
There's no words that can explain it.
Never forget that we stand together in times of adversity.
Good afternoon. We begin our continuing coverage now on the shooting that took place yesterday and how we maintain Orlando strong. The past 36 hours have been tough and trying times for everyone here in Orlando, but despite the heartache, the City Beautiful has come together and proven that love, love, love conquers all.
We are seeing it too.
We sure are. I'm George Estevez.
I'm Vanessa Eccles. During the past day and a half, we have been working to bring you the latest updates on the victims who are still in the hospital, the ones who were lost, and the investigation into how this happened in the first place. So here is the latest information from a news conference that was held this morning about 7:30. 49 victims are confirmed dead. The shooter, who heard the number yesterday of 50, the shooter makes 50. He is not a part of the victim count. 49 victims, and then more than 50 people were injured.
We received an update from the FBI today. They say all of the victims who did not survive the shooting have been taken out of Pulse nightclub, and agents will now do a crime reconstruction of the scene. More names of the victims are slowly coming out. We'll have those for you too. So far, 45 families have been notified about their loved ones. The attack started just after 2 o'clock yesterday morning at Pulse nightclub. The club sits along Orange Avenue in downtown Orlando, a main thoroughfare just south of Cayley Street and less than a half a mile from Orlando Regional Medical Center. We have multiple crews spread out across Orlando, also the state of Florida.
So let's begin now our live team coverage where the worst shooting in U.S. history happened. Channel 9's Carla Ray has been out at the crime scene at Pulse nightclub all day and yesterday as well, monitoring the investigation there. So Carla, I know a lot is going on. Bring us up to speed on what you know so far.
Well, really, the first thing that had to happen was those victims that we've been talking about, the brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers, sons, daughters that were here at this club had to be removed. And since then, crews have been working to reconstruct the scene inside, trying to figure out how this happened. After the unthinkable task of removing the bodies of the victims of the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history, local, state, and federal law enforcement agents began the detailed work of reconstructing the crime scene. And some families still don't know their loved ones were killed.
So I ask that everybody just respect the privacy of the family and that we will advertise those names of those victims, but only at the time that we can confirm the next of kin is notified. The terror attack carried out by 29-year-old Omar Mateen started at 2 a.m. Sunday. Police say Mateen took several hostages inside a bathroom as SWAT and crisis negotiators were called to the scene. 3 hours later, police made the tough decision to break through the walls to rescue people inside after hearing from the shooter himself via 911.
There were no shots at that time, but there was talk about bomb vests, about explosives throughout, and then there were statements made about imminent loss of life. We told you the man who had been investigated by the FBI twice before came out of the same hole created by police as many of the survivors. And now, as the investigation continues into why and how this happened, the focus is on surrounding the victims' families with support.
We have counselors, advocates, and we also have compensation counselors who can also aid with funeral expenses if these victims' families aren't able to do so.
Now, in addition to the work that's going on here on Orange Avenue, law enforcement investigators really reconstructing everything that happened inside Pulse nightclub, there is another team of law enforcement spread out across the state of Florida, really across the country, could even be internationally at this point, trying to reach the next of kin for those victims that have been identified here. Back to you.
And just what Carla was saying, we've talked about this since yesterday, the heartbreaking, excruciating wait for the people who are trying to figure out or find out what happened to their loved ones.
36 hours now. People have been waiting and names have been trickling on that list. The first 4 yesterday in the afternoon, but there's still people who don't have answers.
And at this point, the FBI and the medical examiner have been briefing the families of those who were killed about what to expect in the coming days.
As many as 200 family members came to the Beardall Senior Center looking for answers today. They did yesterday as well. Channel 9's Field Sutton was there, and Field, a lot of those families are still trying, of course, to come to grips with the fact that their loved ones are dead.
And you could absolutely tell by the looks on their faces in most cases. We have watched all day as these families have come and gone from here, often in large groups, trying to just hold the pieces together. They have blank stares on their faces as they just try to comprehend what they have just learned. You've got to realize 48 hours ago, probably some of these people, the biggest thing they were worried about was what to have for dinner. And now in many cases, you have parents making funeral arrangements because they have outlived their children. Now, I did have a chance to speak with one father just a little while ago. His daughter was Mercedes Flores, and she was there with a girl named Amanda Alviar that night at the club. Both of them were killed in the attack. Flores' dad told me his daughter lived here since 2001, and she was only 19 years old when she died inside that club. Today, her dad told me the biggest challenge of all this has been taking his wife, Flores' mom, to identify their daughter's body.
She's a hard worker. She's a hard student. She was a hard student. She was a hard worker. But it's gone.
She is gone. Flores was in college. Her dad tells me that she was trying to figure out what she wanted to do with her life, like so many others, most likely in the club that night. And as we mentioned, their families have a ton of questions right now. I'm working right now to find out what kind of assistance is being offered here at the Senior Center. I'm going to try to bring that to you just as soon as we can later on this afternoon. Live in Orlando, Field Sutton, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
This tragedy affecting so many of the victims' friends and families, but the entire community as well. And so many people on this Monday may have stayed home from work or gone to work, but in their lunch break, they want to find a way to do something to say, look, we didn't forget you.
Because people feel like they have a loss, even if they didn't know them personally.
Of course.
It's a community loss we're feeling. And Channel 9's Mert Price now is at the Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, where we saw just a beautiful tribute earlier in the day, and still a big crowd out there, Mert.
Yes, we've been out here for hours, and we've been watching people walk up, just like two young ladies behind me just a second ago. They're walking up, they're putting down flowers to pay their respects for the victims, but they're also leaving signs. Let me show you this sign here. You can see it says, pray for Orlando, and then messages like you are stronger. Also, they put down banners here, and people are walking up and putting down, writing their names and leaving messages of condolences. Today, we talked to many of those people who lost friends and loved ones. One man we talked to says he lost numerous friends when this tragedy happened.
Peter O. Cruz, he was one of the ones that passed away. He was a very good friend of mine and of my coworkers, and his has hurt me the hardest.
Now, we're going to stay out here and continue to talk to people who show up to pay their respects. There have been a lot of people who didn't have any loved ones in the club that night that were affected by this tragedy, but because they live here in Orlando, because this is such a horrible tragedy, they decided to come out and pay their respects for those who lost their lives. We'll stay out here, continue to bring you their stories. For now, reporting live in Orlando, Mert Price, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
And if you were watching our continuing coverage on Eyewitness News at noon, we had the first images live on the air of people dropping those carnations. There were just a few on the ground, but the line, do you remember the line?
It stretched on what seemed like forever. It was beautiful to see that.
It sure was, and that's not the only place where you can actually see beauty and people doing what they can to send a message. We have that live shot right now of Sky Witness over the scene of the Amway Center, and yesterday they had a message outside the Amway Center, and they have another one out today. Do we have that? There it is.
You can see that it says, in memory of our neighbors who have tragically been taken from us. That's the message there at the Amway Center.
And the Amway Center, as we pointed out, right near the Dr. Phillips Center in downtown, which is, what, a mile from Pulse where the shooting took place. So a real tight-knit community.
And we're seeing community.
Yes, and that is the best part.
Orlando Police Chief John Mina told us how the heroic actions of the first officers on the scene saved dozens of lives.
We're trained to go in if we hear that gunfire, and they did. They prevented him from shooting more people and basically made him retreat into the bathroom away from all the people. So while he retreated into the bathroom, we were able to get out dozens of people who were injured and dozens of people who were hiding.
Chief Mina said that, again, as he mentioned, once the shooter retreated into the bathroom, he stopped shooting, and that allowed two things to happen. They were able to get a hostage negotiator on the phone with the shooter, and SWAT was able to remove an air conditioning unit. That is what allowed dozens of people to crawl through that space and crawl to safety.
And right now we're just getting word actually from our producers here that they have identified all 49 victims in this massacre that took place yesterday. All 49 victims have been identified. We've been showing you that website. We've been putting the names on our own full screens for you. We're going to work on that right now. But in a few minutes, we will have all 49 names of the victims. 2 names, though, have yet to be made public, so we're going to work on that for you. In the aftermath of the shooting, President Obama said as of right now, there is no evidence that the gunman was told by ISIS to carry out this attack.
It does appear that at the last minute, he announced allegiance to ISIL, but there is no evidence so far that he was in fact directed by ISIL, and there also at this stage is no direct evidence that he was part of a larger plot.
In the briefing, the president here also said under Florida law, the weapons that the shooter purchased should have been held for 3 days before he was able to take them home.
It appears that one of those weapons he was able to just carry out of the store, an assault rifle, a handgun, a Glock, which had a lot of clips in it.
So before ending this press conference, which we carried live on WFTV.com, the president wanted to remind everyone affected by this tragedy that America is standing in solidarity with us.
And now we want to give you a live view of something that's going on right now in Fort Pierce in St. Lucie County. This is a live look at the shop where the shooter bought those guns. Channel 9's Janine Reyes is there on the scene. We expect that momentarily she's going to be able to talk to the gun shop owner. So we'll bring that to you just as soon as that is available. Again, that is the place where the shooter bought those guns.
And those guns were purchased, what, 7 to 10 days before the actual shooting yesterday?
That's what someone with the ATF said yesterday, somewhere between a week and a half ago, that those guns were purchased from that store.
And the word that's significant to mention there, they were purchased legally in that store. We're going to continue our coverage here at this 3 o'clock hour. We're not going anywhere. A short break right now. When we come back, we're going to go to more of our reporters in the field. We're going to go online and let you know exactly what we know, when we know, and of course, bring up those victims' names that are scrolling on the bottom of your screen. Don't go anywhere.
I'm on utility 1 if you guys. Mic check 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Mic check. Thank you. Hey Ashley, am I in your show again or not until 4? Okay, and then I'm also in April's 5, correct? Okay. I don't know if I'm doing the Ashton interview or not, but we do need to do that. I just don't know what we're going to ask him.
Is Mike? Is my guy here? We are chilling at your desk. He's at my desk, if you want to bring him in. Welcome back to our continuing coverage here of the Pulse terror attack. Take a look at your screen right now. A live look from Sky Witness 9. Vanessa, we saw this earlier today, but now we have seen this memorial right outside the Dr. Phillips Center keep growing.
At noon, we saw that line of people who were just dropping a single flower, a carnation there at the courtyard. There's going to be a vigil here tonight to honor the victims, celebrate their lives, to remember them. So you can see people there already getting ready for that. That should be very moving this evening.
On their Twitter page, actually, Dr. Phillips Center said, if you're seeking a place to leave memorial items, go ahead and come here. And earlier today, I clipped that. It's on my Facebook page for you guys to see one by one, single file, people dropping a red carnation, a white carnation. Really a beautiful display of Orlando Strong. And that's what we want to focus on today, and also focus on the victims and everyone doing what they can in our community to just say, we're with you. We won't forget you. We understand. And it's just a beautiful thing to see. Hundreds of people are once again answering the call today to donate blood. Something else people are doing following the tragedy yesterday. Victims still in the hospital.
There's some good news this afternoon. One Blood says that so many people have donated between yesterday and today. They have met the immediate need for blood. Channel 9's Raquel Asa found people lining up to donate at UCF.
One Blood had asked for people to donate, and you, the Orlando community, you stepped up in a very big way. This is one of the buses here at UCF, and you can see people didn't waste any time getting in line, and this is one of a couple of buses that will be here throughout the week.
The response is one that One Blood probably didn't expect. Lines wrapped around their parking lot hours after the shooting and the following day at other Big Red Bus locations. UCF handed out tickets to donors to get them out of the heat and into the student union. Each one was called when a spot opened up.
You can actually come to my table.
Hannah Mellon made sure she came out today because she wasn't able to donate at other locations the morning after the shooting.
I tried yesterday and they were cutting off the lines, but came this morning, yeah.
So you're hoping for better success today?
Hopefully.
The response was quick and it was big. In one day, One Blood collected 5,300 units, replenishing the bank, which had been used so much by the more than 50 victims in need of the blood. But the donations will only continue to grow in the coming days as the Orlando community shows just how strong it can be.
Being an ER nurse for 30 years, they need blood. I can only imagine. I know they need blood.
America as a whole will get through this. So.
UCF will have these buses stationed here throughout the campus until Thursday, so you can pop in yourself and donate. Reporting from UCF, Raquel Asa, Channel 9, Eyewitness News.
And the Big Red Bus will be at UCF until 5 o'clock tonight. But as Raquel mentioned, if you can't make it out there today, they will be there until Thursday.
So many people going and donating blood, and so many people also going out taking pictures of what they're seeing around our town after this tragedy. So I clipped some, and I want to show those to you right now. So come with me. This is the touchscreen. I put them all in order. Take a look at that. Orlando Strong. That's the hashtag that we have, that we use here in the studio, and we want you to use as well. Our thoughts and hearts are with the victims of the Orlando tragedy, Orlando Strong. This picture, look at this, you guys. It is a windshield. It is a yellow carnation, friendship, and it simply says, "We stand with you." Little tag, handwritten. It's from the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Another example of the community supporting the families of victims of the Pulse nightclub shooting. Incredible to see stuff like that. All right, take a look at this. This one really touched me. It says, I don't know if you can read it out, "We are a city built on magic. You can't beat us." Vanessa's over there shaking her head. Incredible. Thank you, Carrie, for that little image. And then this is something that you can do, what seemingly looks like a bunch of kids in a neighborhood. They could be related. They're doing a lemonade stand in College Park, the city of College Park, and they're donating the proceeds to One Blood. College Park, a small community, part of Orlando, but it's a couple of miles north. Incredible that they're taking their summer break, because that's where we're in right now, and doing something like this. I can't read what that sign says, but the fact that a bunch of kids, they're doing an old school lemonade stand is kind of, you know, warms your heart. And is this the last one? Yeah, that's the last one. So I'm going to go and find some more and share those with you, but just incredible. WFTV's Twitter page, so much stuff. WFTV's Facebook page, and Vanessa and mine as well. Incredible stuff that you guys are sharing. So thank you for that, Vanessa.
That with those kids, that is way cool. They're going to be very successful, I can tell. Right now, the FBI is preparing to brief U.S. House members on the Orlando mass shooting. And this comes as we're getting some new details about the shooter's leaning toward radical Islam and his claims over the years to be connected to everything from the Boston Marathon bombers to Osama bin Laden. Investigative reporter Christopher Heath has been working on this part of the story for us. So, Chris, we knew the FBI interviewed the shooter at least twice And now we're learning exactly what led to that questioning.
Vanessa, Omar Mateen, who was licensed by the state of Florida to be an armed security guard, was working at courthouses along Florida's Treasure Coast when the FBI first interviewed him. Now, sources tell me he bounced between Indian River County Courthouse and the St. Lucie County Courthouse when he reportedly claimed to family and friends that he had some sort of connections to al-Qaeda. Of course, beyond those claims of connection to al-Qaeda, Mateen also made references to being linked to Hezbollah. This stands out because Hezbollah and ISIS are enemies in the Middle East. Apparently, that interview resulted in no real concrete findings by the FBI. Of course, this was all handled out of the FBI's Miami office, and according to information we've received, the investigation lasted about 10 months. Today, from the District of Columbia, the FBI said it suspects Mateen used the internet to follow radical Islam, saying it is now in possession of his property and will begin to make connections about what he was learning and which way he was leaning when he carried out this attack.
We are going through the killer's life, as I said, especially his electronics, to understand as much as we can about his path and whether there was anyone else involved, either in directing him or in assisting him.
You know, one of the things that stood out to me in this briefing from the FBI is that in their investigation, Mateen said he had hoped law enforcement would raid his apartment and assault his wife and child so that he could murder himself and become a martyr. Of course, we're still working to figure out just how much the FBI knew and when or if it ever communicated with the state of Florida, which not only authorized him to buy 2 guns within the last 2 weeks, but also issued him 2 licenses to be a security guard, one of them a license to be an armed security guard.
And so based on that, would there be a standard protocol? Because you would think that if someone is interviewed twice in a year's time, really it was less than a year, that there would be a way to trigger something with the state so the state would know that. Like, here's this guy that we've interviewed twice.
If the interviews never came to anything, we investigated it, he was just talking to try and sound big for his friends or for whatever reason, then you wonder really what they would have to add to that. But yes, you would think that if there's one interview and then 2 years later we have another one, red flags should have gone up somewhere between the federal level and the state level, that somebody said, hey, keep an eye on this. We're not sure if that ever happened, and we're not sure if it ever would have happened since those interviews never really went anywhere other than him just making boastful claims.
And maybe perhaps what led to the confusion is something else that didn't go anywhere, which is his allegiance. During that news conference, we were here on the air, the FBI said that he was doing this for ISIS and then doing this for the guy out of Miami who was the suicide bomber in Syria. And he was doing this for, so he wasn't even clear who he was doing it for and who he was actually working for, inspired by. Well, his ex-wife yesterday giving her statement, and of course she hasn't talked to him in years, but she said when they were married, she felt like he was bipolar. And you don't know if that's, okay, a medical diagnosis or just her assessment of his behavior. But she did describe somebody who would swing into these violent moods and who kind of went from one side to the other. And if this is what we're dealing with, especially with this person, it seems to make sense that he has anger, but it's directed everywhere.
And he was a licensed security officer, but you found out he also at one point had worked for DOC, Department of Corrections.
Yeah, we reported this last night, and we finally got confirmation this morning from the Florida Department of Corrections. For about 6 months, from 2006 until the first part of 2007, he worked for the Department of Corrections. Now, my sources are telling me what that was he was actually in a training program, and at some point during that training program, he brought a weapon onto DOC grounds. That ended his training. That seems to be about where everything kind of ended for him, and then he got into being a private security officer through this company based here in Orlando, and of course servicing up and down the Treasure Coast, his most recent assignment being a gated retirement community. But yeah, he had been part of the Florida Department of Corrections and for about 6 months was going through its training program.
So many people thinking he's a part of that, then that doesn't work out. He gets investigated twice, that doesn't work out. To what degree are you thinking he should still be on someone's list somewhere on a piece of paper that says, hey, maybe a red flag?
You know, when I interviewed yesterday Congressman John Michael, one of the things he said is he feels like this is a finite group of people that fit kind of this scope, that check off all these boxes where we can say, been investigated, has radical leanings, does this and this, but we don't know. We don't know, is it 15 people? Is it 500 people? How many is the FBI looking at? And realistically, can you say, we've investigated this person and we don't think there's anything here, but they turn out to do something like this, or we investigate somebody and it goes nowhere?
Chris Heath, thank you so much for your reporting. I know you're going to go back in there and do some more. So, see you in a bit. Incredible when you hear all those facts and you literally lay them out and you look at them and you question yourself as to how this could have happened when you have all these pit stops along the way.
Well, going to be a lot of questions going forward that people will be asking into how this could have happened, you know, all the whys, and we may never know the why, but certainly that's going to be part of the investigation. Should he have been watched more closely, buying the guns, all of those things. So a lot of questions there.
You're watching our continuing coverage here on Eyewitness News Channel 9 of the Pulse terror attack. We have all angles covered here for you. We're going to stay on the air on this Monday afternoon, bring you the details as they happen, and give you some perspective, because you've been seeing things online for 36 hours now, but hopefully we'll be able to bring you the perspective to have all that make sense. We'll be right back.
It's actually 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm talking here with candidate for the 2016 election.
Vanessa.
It's on. It's on.
Yeah, test 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Can you step a little bit closer to her?
Of course.
That's good.
Now you can put in your
things that
Welcome back now to our continuing coverage. So many of you have experienced just a wide range of emotions over the past 36 hours or so. And Dwight Bain is joining us again today. You are an expert in handling these types of crises. One thing we want to talk about, a lot of people are saying, I didn't know these people, but I feel such a level of grief.
Yeah.
It's perfectly normal.
It's perfectly normal, but really what that shows is a person who has empathy and compassion. They're feeling the pain because they know what it would be like maybe to lose a son or lose a daughter or lose a friend. So that's a normal reaction, but it also can be a pretty overwhelming reaction. I want to make sure that people are managing emotions, learning to flow with the emotions of trauma, because if you try to hold it all inside, you can literally drown in those emotions. It can create some serious problems.
I know we could talk about that for hours, but to tell people manage emotions, so what do I do?
So if you talk through it, you can get through it. If you talk through it, you can get through it. And if you can't talk to somebody, call a hotline. If you're not going to call a hotline, you get a legal pad and you start writing. And if you're angry, then you write about your anger. And if you're upset and weepy, then you write about the grief. You cannot hold this type of trauma inside. It will lead to STS, secondary trauma syndrome, which leads to PTSD, which leads to self-destructive behavior. So we want people to flow with emotions, talk, write, process, talk to a counselor, talk to a friend, call somebody and say, let's go to dinner tonight and just kind of debrief what's happening, everything we've been watching on WFTV. But you cannot hold this all inside, and we don't want people to go through crisis and trauma alone.
You and I did Facebook Live this afternoon, and so many of those questions dealt with something that a friend of mine here at work, Michelle, said today. How in the world do you talk to kids about what has happened?
Oh, you know what? And when we were on Facebook, and I love that people were, like commenting and sending their questions. I want people to think about the parental guidance rating system for motion pictures, PG-13. If I wouldn't, expose my child because they're younger than 13 to something in a film, then that's kind of a guideline. So if I'm dealing with like one of the moms on Facebook said, I can't stop crying, is it gonna hurt my 2-year-old? No, your 2-year-old needs to know that you're okay. Cuddle with your 2-year-old. So you look at the age of the child, the psychological maturity of the child, but don't forget that parental guidance system. In fact, Vanessa, you're the one that said, hey, what about this? And that was such a good idea, because then I can look at, okay, he's 10, but I wouldn't take him to a PG-13, then I'm not gonna expose him to certain elements of the horrors that happen in this terrorist attack. We are gonna talk about, here's the reality of what took place. People died. There's evil in the world, but you know what? Our family is safe. You're here with mom and dad, and we'll get through this. And in fact, it's maybe great to take children to some of the community festivals, some of the prayer vigils, and to say, we're gonna be there and we're gonna pray for her, we're gonna light a candle, we're gonna support our community. By doing that, it shows hope after crisis.
All right, Dwight Bain, thank you so much for joining us again today. Just want to share some information because this is, as I described it yesterday, an emotional hurt for our entire community. So thanks for helping us to get through this. George?
Incredible stuff. STS, secondary trauma syndrome. Incredible for people to remember that so they can avoid falling into that pitfall. So thank you, Vanessa, so much for bringing him along and really helping us all. Even if you took away a phrase from that, it'll make all the difference. You're watching our continuing coverage here on Eyewitness News. The Pulse terror attack. We've been bringing you perspective. We've been bringing you live reports from the field. We're sharing items on social media, just giving you a hug of information so you guys can go ahead and make your own decisions and draw your own conclusions. But here is where you can get the info to do that. So thank you for watching and for continuing to watch. We'll be right back after this short break.
Good info. We have a breaking development now in our coverage now of the terror attack here in Orlando, something that reporter Shannon Butler has just found out.
Yes, she sure has. Apparently, that Pulse nightclub on Orange Avenue right by downtown Orlando was not the first place that the shooter, Omar Mateen, may have scoped out. Let's go live to Shannon Butler. She's at the scene. Shannon, it's an area that many of us feared one day may be an issue. So what do you got?
Well, that is what we assumed. If it was going to happen, it would happen at Disney World. Government sources now telling me that the shooter drove around Disney Springs for 6 hours before this shooting here at the Pulse nightclub. They tell me that cell phone pinged around that area time and time again. They do not know, however, what he was planning, if anything, at Disney Springs, and they don't know yet why he traveled here to the Pulse nightclub, but they do know that he was looking at other locations. I asked sources if they think there could be somewhere else besides Disney Springs, besides Pulse, and at this point they say they weren't sure. Reports have come in that there may have been other clubs that were also targeted, but at this point they say the only thing they know for sure is that he did drive around Disney Springs and he did wind up here at the Pulse nightclub. Now, we don't know just how many hours before the shooting that he was driving around. We're just told that it was several hours before the shooting here at the nightclub. You can see here at this nightclub still agents inside the club trying to gather all the information that they can. FDLE, FBI, both in that club right now going through the crime scene. We talked to a SWAT commander just a few minutes ago who told us that scene is horrific inside there, that it is difficult when it comes to gathering evidence, but they're doing the best they can. Of course, that information about Disney Springs pivotal in this investigation, because they want to know exactly what he was targeting, if there were other places, and what they can find out about that. That is why they're going through that computer, they tell me, to try to figure out what his plans were. They will tell me again that this was very well planned out. They are not sure what happened when it came to Disney Springs, if he got spooked, if something he realized it wasn't good, or maybe he wasn't trying at all, but he did drive around that area for 6 hours. That is an awfully long time.
Shannon, one question that Vanessa and I have for you at this point. You talked about the pings on the cell phone. Is that the way that they were able to figure out that he was hanging out at Disney Springs for that amount of time, or was it the computer?
No, it was actually the cell phone pings, I'm told, when they pulled his cell phone and they went through it and went through the information of where he might have been in Orlando. I'm told there are other places too, but I don't know if that was to eat dinner or what he was doing. But around Disney, of course, they would check that because we know it is such a hot spot, and the cell phone pinged on towers, maybe not just one tower, but several towers around that area. I asked them if they drove all the way around Walt Disney World or if it was just kind of in that vicinity of Disney Springs, and all they could tell me is it hit on Disney Springs.
Just disturbing information, but that's something that people were talking about yesterday as well. You know, why Pulse? Was there any other area that he may have looked at or spotted?
And as Shannon reported, he was at Disney Springs for hours. Maybe he realized that wasn't a target. Maybe he was diverted and went somewhere else. Maybe he went to go and possibly not say, all right, this is going to be the target. Maybe he went to check it out and see, and then one drink led to another, or one circumstance led to another, and that's just where he chose. And we were talking about the theme parks after 9/11 and being a soft target.
And we were talking about questions that we'll never have answered, and that's one we'll never have answered, the why there.
The why. All right, so at this moment, we're going to, well, do what we need to do, which is focus on the victims.
Because that's what it's all about today. It's about them and their lives.
It is about them. We're going to pause several times this afternoon and go ahead and do that. The people, the family members, the friends, the parents, so many people, sons, daughters, cousins, aunts, uncles. We told you less than 30 minutes ago, all of the victims have now been identified. We're going to read through them right now. Stanley Almodovar III was 23 years old. He was among the first 4 identified yesterday. Amanda Alvear, she was 25 years old. Fun picture of her there. Tevin Eugene Crosby, he was 25 years old, which is a theme. We're seeing a lot of young people attending that club that night.
Leroy Valentin Fernandez, just 25 years old. Peter O. Gonzalez Cruz, 22 years old. Juan Ramon Guerrero, 22 years old.
And more names to add to that list. It's great they were able to put faces with these names. Jason Benjamin Josephat, he was 19 years old, a teenager. Kimberly Morris was 37 years old. She was referred to as KJ and was a bouncer at Pulse. We talked about her today on Eyewitness News at noon as we continued our coverage.
And she was the one who just moved here just a couple of months ago to help care for her mom and grandmother.
Also, Luis Omar Ocasio Capo, he was 20 years old.
Javier Jorge Reyes, 40 years old.
Also, Edward Sotomayor Jr., he was 34 years old. Now, this was the gentleman, the first person on the list. Also, I have a friend who's a friend of Edward's, and I had a chance to speak to him yesterday, Nate Carrick, and we were on the air for like 20 minutes during our continuing coverage all day Sunday. We were on the air, and we talked about Edward. Honest guy, great guy. And he also sent out a couple of Snapchats moments before the shooter went on that rampage inside of Pulse. So we learned a little bit more about Edward Sotomayor. And look, if it was up to us, we would spend minutes and minutes talking about each of them. So if you know, by the way, aside any of these people, feel free to contact my Facebook page or Vanessa's, and we would like to go ahead and talk to you.
Shane Evan Tomlinson, 33 years old.
Martin Benitez Torres, he was 33 years old. Frankie Jimmy de Jesus Velasquez was 50 years old. Luis S. Vielma was 22 years old. And Luis, actually, Martha Zagowski was on yesterday with Greg Warmoth, and Martha found out that her son, Chase, the eldest son who just graduated, is on his way to law school, just found out that, in fact, he was friends with Luis. They went to school together. Luis loved playing soccer. So these are little tidbits that we're finding out about these people, and their deaths hit close to so many people.
Gerald Jerry Arthur Wright, 31 years old. And then there are some of the victims for whom we're still collecting their photos. Eric Ivan Ortiz Rivera, 36 years old. Eddie Justice, 30 years old. Daryl Roman Burt II, 29 years old.
Dianca Deidre Drayton, 32 years old. Alejandro Barrios Martinez, 21 years old. Anthony Luis Lorendoisla, 25 years old. And Giancarlos Mendez Perez, 35 years old.
Luis Daniel Wilson Leon, 37 years old. Mercedes Marisol Flores. If you recall, I think it was during today at noon, one of her friends was mentioning that they were trying to find her, and just the heartbreak she felt when she saw her name on the list this morning. 26 years old. Javier Emmanuel Serrano Rosado, 35 years old. And Gilberto Roman Silvia Menendez, just 25 years old.
More names that we're still looking for pictures for. So again, if you know these people, perhaps have a picture, go ahead and contact us. Simon Adrian Carrillo Fernandez, 31 years old. Oscar A. Arancina Montero, 26 years old. Enrique L. Rios Jr., 25 years old. Miguel Angel Honorato, 30 years old.
Joel Rehan Paniagua, 32 years old. Corey James Cannell, just 21 years old. Juan P. Rivera Velasquez, 37 years old.
Luis Daniel Conde, 39 years old. Juan Chavez Martinez, 25 years old. Jonathan Antonio Camuy Vega, 24 years old.
Jean C. Nieves Rodriguez, 27. Rodolfo Ayala, 33 years old. Brenda Lee Marquez McCool, 49 years old.
And Yilmari Rodriguez Sullivan, 24 years old. Christopher Andrew Leononin, 32 years old. Angel L. Candelario Padro, 28 years old. Frank Hernandez, 27 years old. Paul Terrell Henry, 41 years old.
Antonio Devon Brown, 29 years old. Christopher Joseph Sanfeliz, 24 years old.
And looking at that list and hearing those names being read off, most of them are Hispanic, Latin descent. It was Latin night at the club.
Because the club has theme nights, and so it was Latin night that night.
So that's why a lot of the names you're seeing and you're hearing us read are of Hispanic heritage or have the Hispanic last name. And a lot of them, that's why a lot of them are hyphenated with double last names, because in the Hispanic culture, you take your mom's name, you take your dad's name, and you kind of put them all on the Social Security card and figure it out. But that's kind of why we're seeing all these Hispanic names.
And I was thinking, never a time in like all of my years doing television news would there be a chance for us to read the names of victims, but it's so appropriate in this incident, because never have we had something like this happen in Orlando. But again, our coverage today is about honoring those victims and their lives and saying their names. So it's not just a number, because you've heard the number so many times, 49, and it just takes our breath away every time we say it. But there are people behind those numbers, and so that's our way of honoring them.
And I got to be honest, reading that list, it just seemed never ending. And that's what makes this tragedy that took place in our backyard so much worse. Not that one life wouldn't have been tragic, but 49 of them. 49 of them.
Yeah.
In a matter of minutes, that just gets you.
We want to move along now. We have Channel 9's Blaine Tollison at the Islamic Center in Sanford. One of the things we've been dealing with, some just allegations of hate crimes against some of these centers, some spray painting, someone spray painting Stop the Hate. Let's check in with Blaine now at this, he's at the Seminole County Sheriff's Office, I believe. He left there about an hour ago, and this is the Hussein Islamic Center in Sanford, where leaders found this message spray painted on the side of the building, the hashtag Stop the Hate.
There has been so much fallout from this tragedy, and residents in Seminole County certainly think that this is more of that here in the negative direction. This is where the Seminole County Sheriff's Office left about an hour ago. This is the Husseini Islamic Center in Sanford, where leaders found this message spray painted on the side of the building, hashtag Stop the Hate. Right now, I'm working to find out if there is more vandalism inside. Deputies are still working this case, they told me. This is video from earlier when they showed up around 2 o'clock today. Last night, this Islamic Center actually held a prayer vigil for the victims of the shooting at the Pulse nightclub. The center also issued a statement today, which in part read, "We condemn this horrific attack and offer our heartfelt condolences to the families and loved ones of all those killed or injured." One resident stopped and we spoke to him, and he was not happy about the vandalism on the Islamic Center, saying this could create problems in the community that they just don't need.
This could escalate into something we really don't need. And these folks have been super peaceful.
Plenty of time. The Islamic Center statement went on to encourage its members to help in the community. It also read, "Our community stands united with our fellow Americans in denouncing any action that would claim to justify such atrocious acts of violence. We are encouraging our members to donate blood and support any and all efforts to alleviate the pain and suffering caused by this tragedy." So far, leaders have not addressed what happened here at their center directly, declining to comment on camera, but again, issuing that statement to us today. We're live here in Sanford. Blaine Tollison, Channel 9, Eyewitness News.
Incredible how people react, and they're trying desperately to express themselves, but there's the right way to do it and then the wrong way to do it.
And then yesterday, we had the service at the mosque there in Kissimmee
Yep.
as well.
All right, right now we're going to move on to go back to the scene where this all took place early morning on Sunday, more than 36 hours since it's happened. It's still active, it's still blocked off, so much activity down there.
Channel 9's Carla Ray is still on the scene there. So Carla, what's the latest that you can tell us?
Well, we've learned within the last half hour or so from a law enforcement source that there were a total of around 200 bullets found on the scene here. That's between investigators shooting at that terrorist and the shots fired at those victims. We can push into the scene here and show you what we've been showing you for really the last 2 days now. This massive law enforcement presence here on our main thoroughfare through our city here. We've been telling you about the work going on here. They're working to reconstruct the scene inside Pulse nightclub. Also, there are a few other things happening simultaneously. We just heard the names of the victims read one by one on our air here. Investigators have been working diligently for the past 24 hours to find the families of those those victims and make that notification, giving them that awful news that no one wants to hear, that their loved one was killed during an act of terror, a mass shooting right here in Orlando. Also going on, the investigation into why and how this happened. We heard from Shannon Butler, her sources telling her that this man circled Disney Springs for 6 hours before deciding to come here to Pulse. FBI has agents here on scene, as well as up in Quantico at the FBI headquarters in Virginia, working to track the moves of this man. They're looking into their past investigations into him. We've been telling you that Omar Mateen was investigated twice by the FBI, both times cleared even after he made statements to his coworkers about terrorism and also having ties to a suicide bomber. This was a guy known to the FBI. Also, we're hearing from the president today saying that even though he was able to purchase those guns legally, there should have been a waiting period for one of those firearms, but instead that man was able to walk out of a gun shop here in Florida and come here to our city to commit this horrific act that took the lives of 49 people. We're going to continue to hear about those victims throughout the day, and we'll of course stay on top of the scene out here on Orange Avenue, as there is still much more work to be done.
All right, Carla, thank you so much. She's been at the scene yesterday uncovering information, and today still staying on top of any new developments. As you can imagine, it is something that's going to happen throughout the day and evolve throughout the day as well.
We talked about just moments ago that there were theme nights at Pulse, and that night was Latin night.
Very popular. So many Hispanics heading there, and people who appreciate Latin music and Latin house music. And a lot of the Latin organizations and Hispanic groups in town have now come together and joined. As a matter of fact, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is serving as a liaison for the city of Orlando. Let's get right out to Melanie Holt, Eyewitness News reporter Melanie Holt. Melanie, you're at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce headquarters, Metro Orlando. There was a briefing throughout the day. What can you tell us?
Well, we're actually here off of West Colonial right now, where 20 Central Florida organizations came together to announce Somos Orlando, or We're Orlando. And as details continue to emerge about Sunday morning's devastating attack at the Pulse, a gay nightclub, the Hispanic community, as you mentioned, is also reeling from this too. Somos Orlando was formed to provide support, information, and resources for the local Hispanic community and their families. The group said today there is also a need for more bilingual mental health professionals. They say all types of volunteers, though, are needed, and you can learn more at Somos Orlando Info. Again, that's SomosOrlando.info. Now, one of the speakers that we heard from today was a first responder during 9/11. That was in New York City when she was a sergeant. She wasn't at Pulse, but says this community is experiencing some of that same loss that she saw after 9/11. Listen to what Nancy Rosado had to say.
The similarities start overlapping in the reactions of the families. The pain of not knowing if your loved one has survived, if they're in the hospital, and what condition they're in, the waiting for the names to be released, the waiting for news of and updates, physical updates, was just overwhelming for these families.
Now, there are a few organizations that are already offering these services, bilingual counseling. They include the Hispanic Family Counseling, the Victims Services Center, and Two Spirits Zebra Coalition. And again, if you would like to volunteer to help out, the place you need to go is SomosOrlando.info. We're live here in Orlando. Melanie Holt, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
And we talk about the entire Orlando community, the entire country being impacted by this, but a couple of subgroups were also impacted, the LGBT group and the Hispanic group, because of the theme Latin night that it was, and so many Hispanic groups coming together. Somos Orlando, or basically it says, I am Orlando.
I like that.
Yeah, so it kind of just gives you chills talking about that. But that's the hashtag, and people out there, remember these kids speak English, right? But I know for a fact their parents may not. You know, and they need to get guidance now as to what to do. Funeral services, if for the victims in the hospital still. So many questions. We can barely understand the government system, and we speak the language. You know, when you call a number or get online for something. So for these people who don't speak the language and there's a barrier to have someone translate, they're looking for certified translators too. So it is a key part of moving on and the recovery process.
So we have had quite a few updates for you and some new information as well. Remember, we've already put information on the victims, the vigils, and the investigation into the gunman. It's all on your smartphone. phone. You can download the WFTV News app for free, and there's plenty of information for you there. We will be right back.